Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In the bustling city of Kumaji, a secret long buried beneath ancient traditions has been unearthed. Amara, a young man drawn to a mysterious glowing amulet, unknowingly sets off a chain of events that brings an ancient darkness to life. The abyss, a realm of living shadows and fear, calls to him. Now, Amara must confront the twisted forces of the ancient cult, face his deepest fears, and unite with his community to prevent the awakening of a malevolent force that threatens to consume everything. Will Amara's courage be enough to seal the darkness, or will the shadows take him? Find out in this gripping African folktale of light versus darkness. Join Amara on his thrilling journey in the awakening of shadows, Amara's journey into the abyss, an unforgettable story of magic, ancient power, and the fight to protect one's soul. In the heart of Kumaji, a city alive with whispers and ancient traditions, a secret had been buried for centuries, until now. Amara, a young man from the bustling streets of the city, had no idea his life was about to change. The night was unusually still, and a strange energy seemed to hum through the air. Amara's mother had always warned him never to wander into the old market after dark, but tonight, something pulled him there. A strange light flickered from an abandoned building deep in the shadows. Amara's curiosity got the best of him. His footsteps echoed on the cobblestone path as he approached the source of the light. As he pushed open the creaking door, a chill ran down his spine. Inside the building, at the center of the room, was a circle made of bones and strange symbols drawn in red. A small object lay in the center, glowing faintly, a golden amulet covered in ancient markings. Amara bent down, feeling a dark force radiating from it. As his fingers touched the amulet, everything changed. The walls around him began to tremble, and a deep, bone-chilling voice filled the air. "You've found it," the voice whispered, "and now, you must pay the price." Before he could react, the shadows around him began to move, forming into the shape of a figure cloaked in darkness. The figure's eyes glowed red as it stepped closer, reaching for the amulet. Panicking, Amara stuffed the amulet into his pocket and ran. But as he fled through the narrow streets of Kumaji, he realized he wasn't alone. The shadows followed him, twisting and bending in impossible ways. The amulet was no ordinary object, it was the key to a long-forgotten secret, a power that an ancient cult had been guarding for centuries. And now that Amara had it, they would stop at nothing to retrieve it. Amara didn't stop running until he reached the edge of the city. His chest burned, and his legs ached, but the fear coursing through his veins was stronger than the pain. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the shadowy figure still chasing him. The streets were empty, but the sense of being watched clung to him like a cold wind. He pulled out the amulet and examined it under the dim streetlight. The markings were unlike anything he had ever seen, ancient, powerful, and dangerous. Amara knew he couldn't keep it. But where could he take it? Who could he trust? Before he could decide, a soft rustling noise came from the alley nearby. Amara froze. From the shadows emerged a woman, her eyes sharp and her movement silent. She wore a long, dark cloak, and in her hand was a staff carved with symbols similar to those on the amulet. "I see you've found it," she said, her voice calm but filled with menace. "The shadows will come for you, you know. You've crossed into something far beyond your understanding." "Who are you?" Amara demanded, backing away slowly. I'm the only one who can help you, she replied. But you must trust me. Give me the amulet before it's too late. If they catch you with it, the consequences will be dire. Amara's heart pounded in his chest. Could he trust this stranger? The darkness seemed to close in around him, and the weight of the amulet grew heavier in his pocket. But something told him this woman wasn't the only one hunting him. Just as he was about to speak, the deafening roar echoed through the streets. The ground beneath him trembled, and the air grew thick with an unnatural energy. The shadows were coming. Amara had no choice. He sprinted after the woman, who led him down a series of twisting alleys until they reached an old wooden door hidden behind thick vines. She knocked twice in a strange pattern, and the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with strange artifacts and scrolls. Inside sat an old man, hunched over a table covered in candles and bones. His eyes were clouded with age, but they flickered with recognition when he saw the amulet in Amara's hand. The shadows have awakened, the old man muttered. You should have left it buried. What is this thing? Amara demanded, holding up the amulet. The old man sighed. It's a key, boy. A key to powers you cannot imagine. The cult that guards it, the Brotherhood of the Shadow, has been waiting for this moment for centuries. They believe the amulet will unlock something dark. And now they will stop at nothing to get it back. Amara felt a cold wave of fear wash over him. What do they want with it? They want control, the old man whispered. Control over life, death, and everything in between. The cult's rituals are powerful. They use the blood of animals, chanting to invoke spirits and forces that no man should ever meddle with. You've seen their shadows. They are not human anymore. The woman, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. You have two choices, Amara, she said quietly. Give us the amulet, and we will protect you. Or keep it, and face the cult's wrath alone. Before Amara could respond, the door to the room burst open. A gust of freezing wind howled through, and the shadows outside twisted into monstrous shapes. The cult had found them. The gust of wind that rushed into the room was cold enough to freeze Amara's blood. The shadows that poured through the door twisted into grotesque forms, slithering along the walls like living nightmares. They had no faces, no bodies, just dark, swirling figures with glowing red eyes that pierced the gloom. Amara stumbled back as the old man grabbed his staff and began chanting in a language so ancient, it felt like the very air around him shivered. The woman moved swiftly, pushing Amara behind her as the shadows lunged forward, their inky black hands reaching out to snatch the amulet from his grasp. Suddenly, one of the shadows let out a terrible screech, and the candles in the room flickered violently. It was as if the entire space was being swallowed by the darkness. Amara felt the amulet pulsing in his pocket, its power trying to break free. The old man's voice rose in a frantic shout. Hold on. Do not let go of it. Their power grows when they sense fear. But Amara couldn't help it, his heart was pounding in his chest, his breath coming in short, terrified gasps. The shadows were closing in, circling him like hungry beasts. He could feel the cold creeping closer, the chill of death itself. Suddenly, the woman raised her hand and slammed her staff into the ground. A blinding light erupted from the floor, forcing the shadows back. They hissed and recoiled as the light grew brighter, illuminating the symbols on the walls that Amara hadn't noticed before, symbols just like the ones on the amulet. The old man's voice cracked as he gasped, the light won't hold them for long. You must leave, now. But before Amara could move, one of the shadows broke through the barrier of light. Its dark, clawed hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, the icy cold burning his skin. He screamed in pain as the shadow pulled him towards the darkness. The amulet in his pocket began to glow brighter, as if trying to protect him, but the power of the shadows was too strong. With a final desperate yank, the woman struck the shadow with her staff, and it dissolved into mist, leaving Amara trembling on the floor. But the victory was short-lived. The other shadows gathered outside the door, their glowing eyes filled with hunger. "They won't stop," the woman whispered. "Not until they have the amulet or you." Amara stumbled through the narrow alleyways, the echoes of the shadows' hissing whispers following him. The woman had told him to run, to get as far away from the old market as possible, but every shadow he passed seemed to pulse with the cult's dark energy. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His mind raced. What was the amulet really? And why had it chosen him? Every step he took felt heavier, as if the weight of its secret was pressing down on his soul. He couldn't outrun the truth forever. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. Spinning around, he saw the woman from the old man's room, her face a mask of fear and anger. "You were supposed to trust me," she hissed, her voice low but sharp like a knife in the night. Amara backed away, confusion gripping him. "You helped me escape, why are you angry?" Her eyes glinted with something darker than he had first noticed. "Because you don't understand what you've unleashed." She stepped closer, her presence becoming more menacing with every word. "That amulet holds power over life and death. And it's not just the cult who wants it. Others have been waiting for centuries for the chance to control it." Amara's blood ran cold. The woman wasn't trying to protect him, she was after the amulet, too. Before he could react, her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with terrifying strength. "Give it to me, now. Before it's too late." Just as she reached for his pocket, a shrill scream cut through the air. The ground beneath them trembled as the walls of the alley began to crack. From the shadows, monstrous figures appeared, twisted creatures born from the cult's darkest magic. Their red eyes glowed with a hunger that sent shivers down Amara's spine. The woman let go of him, her face twisting in fear. "No, they're coming for us both." The monstrous figures slithered closer, their red eyes glowing brighter with every step. Amara and the woman stood frozen as the shadows enveloped the narrow alley, swallowing the dim street lights. The only thing standing between them and the creatures was the faint glow of the amulet in Amara's hand. "We need to leave," the woman whispered, her voice trembling now, her earlier arrogance replaced with pure terror. "They are too strong." But Amara was done running. He knew that as long as he had the amulet, the shadows would never stop hunting him. He needed answers, he needed to understand what kind of power was hidden within this ancient object. With a sudden burst of determination, Amara clutched the amulet tightly and raised it toward the approaching creatures. To his surprise, the shadows recoiled, their hissing growing louder as if in pain. The amulet's glow intensified, lighting up the alleyway and revealing something truly horrifying, an ancient symbol etched into the ground beneath their feet. A dark ritual had been performed here, ages ago. The earth was scarred, and the cult's power had left its mark. The symbol looked exactly like the one on the amulet. The woman gasped. This is where it all began." The shadows, furious at being repelled by the light, began to chant in low, guttural tones. The air grew heavy with their voices, and the ground shook violently. The creatures melted into the shadows once more, disappearing into the dark corners of the alley. But Amara knew they weren't gone. They were preparing for something far worse. Without warning, the ground beneath them split open, revealing a deep, swirling abyss. From within, the chant of the cult grew louder, and a figure began to rise, a cloaked figure, shrouded in black mist, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. The woman turned to Amara, her face pale with horror. "They are summoning him, the one who was never meant to return." The cloaked figure rising from the abyss towered over them, its presence suffocating. The air crackled with dark energy, and the shadows that had once chased them now seemed to cower before this new entity. Its glowing eyes locked onto Amara, and for a moment, everything went silent, no whispers, no wind, just the paralyzing stare of this monstrous being. The woman fell to her knees, clutching her chest as though her heart had stopped beating. "We can't fight this," she whispered. "This is a power beyond anything you can imagine." Amara gripped the amulet tighter, but it felt cold now, lifeless in his hand. The light that had once shielded him was flickering, fading as if the presence of this creature drained every ounce of its strength. The ground beneath them trembled as the figure began to speak, its voice like thunder rumbling through the earth. "You've come far, but not far enough," it growled, each word dripping with malice. "That amulet was never yours to hold, boy." Amara tried to back away, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. The creature's hand reached out, long and skeletal, its fingers like claws made of smoke. As it neared him, the shadows that had retreated earlier surged forward again, ready to consume him. Just as the creature's claws grazed Amara's skin, the woman let out a desperate scream. With trembling hands, she slammed her staff into the cracked earth, unleashing a wave of energy that momentarily pushed the shadows back. "We need to run," she shouted, pulling Amara to his feet. "If we stay, we'll die here." Amara stumbled after her, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. The alley began to collapse behind them, walls crumbling into dust as the creature roared in anger, its voice shaking the very fabric of reality. The shadows chased them relentlessly, their hunger for the amulet stronger than ever. As they turned the corner into an old market square, the ground exploded beneath their feet, sending them sprawling. The creature's dark energy was tearing the city apart, and it was only a matter of time before it found them again. Amara looked around frantically. The ancient marketplace was empty, its once bustling streets now eerily silent. But something caught his eye, a faint glow from beneath a broken stone fountain in the center of the square. "The Fountain of Souls," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible through the ringing in Amara's ears. "There's only one way to stop this." Before Amara could respond, the shadows found them again, slithering across the stones like a black tide. The creature's voice echoed in the distance, growing louder as it drew closer. "We don't have much time," she gasped. "We need to summon the Guardian." The woman's words sent a chill down Amara's spine. The Guardian? What Guardian? There had been no mention of this before, no hint that anyone or anything could stand against the terror that was coming for them. But as he looked into her desperate eyes, he realized she was running out of options, just as he was. The shadows were closing in fast, twisting through the cracks in the ground, their glowing eyes narrowing on the amulet in Amara's pocket. Every second they waited was another second they edged closer to death, or worse. Without thinking, Amara reached into his pocket and pulled out the amulet, its light flickering weakly as if on the verge of being snuffed out. The woman knelt by the fountain, tracing strange symbols in the dirt with trembling fingers. "Hurry," she cried, her voice breaking under the weight of her fear. The amulet pulsed in Amara's hand, reacting to the ancient symbols the woman drew. A faint hum vibrated through the air, growing stronger with every stroke of her hand. The shadows recoiled, hesitant for the first time since the chase had begun. Amara moved closer to the fountain, feeling the ground beneath his feet tremble with dark energy. The glow from the amulet flickered, then burned brighter as the symbols on the ground started to connect. The air around them grew thick, almost suffocating, and a deep rumbling sound echoed from the earth itself. Suddenly, the ground split open beneath the fountain, and from the depths of the earth rose a figure unlike any Amara had ever seen. It was massive, its form made entirely of stone and earth, yet it moved with a grace that defied its size. Its eyes glowed with an ethereal light, and its chest pulsed with the same power as the amulet in Amara's hand. "The Guardian of the Lost," the woman breathed, her eyes wide with awe and fear. "It's real." The Guardian's gaze fell on Amara, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, with a voice like grinding stone, it spoke. "You hold the key to salvation or destruction." Before Amara could respond, the guardian turned its attention to the shadows creeping toward them. With one massive swing of its arm, the guardian sent a wave of energy rippling through the marketplace. The shadows shrieked as they were flung back, dissolving into mist before disappearing entirely. But the victory was short-lived. In the distance, the cloaked figure was still coming, its power growing with every step. The guardian turned to Amara, its glowing eyes locking onto his. The darkness will not stop until the amulet is returned to the source. Amara's heart raced. Where is the source? The guardian's voice rumbled like a distant storm. Far beneath the city, hidden in the temple of the lost. The woman's face went pale. The temple, it's been sealed for centuries. The guardian raised its stone arm, pointing to the horizon. The path is open, but the price will be high. Amara's chest tightened as the ground continued to tremble beneath their feet. The woman, still pale from the guardian's revelation, stood frozen in place. The temple of the lost, sealed for centuries, was the key to everything, but the idea of entering such a place filled them both with dread. We can't. The woman stammered, her eyes darting between Amara and the hulking figure of the guardian. No one has ever come back from there. It's cursed. The guardian's voice rumbled again, low and ominous. If you do not return the amulet, there will be nothing left of this world. The darkness will consume everything. Amara looked down at the amulet in his trembling hand. Its faint light flickered, but something inside him told him that the path ahead, however terrifying, was their only chance. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to ignore the pounding in his chest. Where is the temple? Amara asked, trying to steady his voice. The guardian extended its stone hand, pointing toward the far side of the city. The temple lies beneath the old ruins, hidden from sight. But beware, once you enter, there will be no turning back. The woman's face twisted with fear and disbelief. We'll never make it through the ruins. It's suicide. But Amara felt something stir within him, a flicker of defiance. They had come too far, and now that the shadows had been driven back, there was no turning away from the truth. We have no choice, he said firmly, glancing at her. If we don't do this, the darkness will destroy everything. The guardian stepped aside, allowing them passage. Its glowing eyes dimmed slightly as it spoke its final words. I cannot follow you into the temple. Beyond this point, you are on your own. But the amulet will guide you, if you are worthy. With those words, the guardian began to sink back into the ground, returning to the depths from which it came. The silence that followed was deafening. Amara turned to the woman, who hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Fine, she said, though her voice quivered. Let's go. The two of them started running toward the ruins on the far side of the city. The buildings around them, once full of life, were now crumbling under the weight of the growing darkness. As they neared the ruins, the temperature seemed to drop, and the once sturdy structures around them gave way to decay and dust. Finally, they reached the entrance to the ruins. An ancient stone archway loomed before them, overgrown with vines and moss, its once proud pillars cracked and broken. Beyond the archway was a dark tunnel that seemed to descend endlessly into the earth. Amara took a deep breath and stepped forward. The woman followed close behind, her hand on her staff, ready for whatever horrors awaited them. The tunnel was cold and damp, and the farther they went, the more oppressive the air became. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a massive underground chamber. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone door, covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the darkness. Amara recognized the symbols immediately. They were the same ones that had appeared on the amulet. This is it, he whispered, his heart racing. The Temple of the Lost. As they approached the door, the amulet in Amara's hand began to glow brighter. The carvings on the door shifted and moved as though they were alive, reacting to the presence of the ancient artifact. Without warning, the door began to creak open, revealing a pitch-black abyss beyond. Amara and the woman exchanged a glance, both knowing that whatever lay on the other side would change everything. With a final breath, they stepped into the temple. As soon as they crossed the threshold of the temple, the air around them thickened with a suffocating darkness. It was unlike anything Amara had felt before, an oppressive weight that seemed to pull at his very soul. The walls of the temple were lined with ancient, glowing runes, but their light barely pierced the overwhelming blackness that swirled in every corner. The woman clutched her staff tightly, her eyes darting around the chamber. "Something isn't right. I can feel it." Before Amara could respond, the shadows along the walls began to shift. At first, it was subtle, just a flicker in the corner of his eye. But then they moved again, faster this time, swirling together like smoke until they took shape. Figures, twisted, hollow shapes, emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing a sickly green. "They are watching us," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "They know we are here." Amara's grip tightened on the amulet, its light flickering weakly in the oppressive darkness. "What are they?" he asked, though deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The shadows began to move toward them, their bodies twisting unnaturally as they floated across the chamber. Their faces were featureless, save for the glowing green eyes that seemed to pierce straight into Amara's soul. The air grew colder with every passing second, and Amara could feel his breath catching in his throat. "They are guardians of the temple," the woman explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "They protect the source, the place where the amulet's power comes from." One of the shadowy figures reached out, its long, wispy fingers brushing against Amara's arm. The moment it touched him, a wave of cold shot through his body, freezing him to the bone. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the amulet. "We have to keep moving," the woman urged, her eyes wide with fear. "If they touch you for too long, they'll drain the life from you." The shadows grew bolder, closing in on them from all sides. Amara's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the woman deeper into the temple, the shadows creeping ever closer. But just as all seemed lost, the amulet flared with a sudden burst of light. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they retreated into the darkness. "We can't stop now," Amara said through gritted teeth. "We are getting closer to the source." But as they pressed on, they couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was waiting for them in the depths of the temple, a terror that not even the shadows could prepare them for. As Amara and the woman ventured deeper into the temple, the oppressive air grew thicker, and the cold gnawed at their bones. The faint glow of the amulet was their only guide through the suffocating darkness. Every step they took echoed ominously, as though the temple itself was alive, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast underground chamber. The walls were lined with ancient murals depicting a forgotten past, scenes of rituals, offerings, and mysterious figures draped in shadows. In the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, its surface covered in strange symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light. Around the altar, pools of black liquid bubbled and hissed, sending tendrils of dark mist swirling through the air. This is the heart of the temple," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "It's where the amulet draws its power." Amara could feel the pull of the amulet, its light growing stronger as they neared the altar. But something else stirred in the chamber, a presence so dark and ancient that it sent chills down his spine. The air hummed with a deep, malevolent energy, and the shadows that had pursued them earlier seemed to retreat, as if even they feared what lay ahead. "We are not alone," the woman said, clutching her staff tightly. Amara didn't need her to tell him that. He could feel it too, the sensation of being watched, hunted. The flickering light of the amulet revealed something moving at the edges of the chamber, just beyond their line of sight. It slithered and shifted in the darkness, a massive, formless shadow that seemed to breathe with the pulse of the temple. "What is that?" Amara whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of energy in the room. Before the woman could respond, the shadow took form. A monstrous figure, towering over them, emerged with awfully glowing green eyes that burned with an ancient, unspeakable evil. Its body was made of shifting darkness, tendrils of shadow curling and writhing around it like living snakes. The guardian of the source, the woman breathed, her face pale. "It's been waiting for us." The creature loomed closer, its eyes locked on the amulet in Amara's hand. With each step it took, the ground beneath them shook, and the air grew colder. Amara felt frozen in place, his heart hammering in his chest. The amulet, once a source of comfort, now felt like a heavy burden, pulsing with dark energy. Suddenly, the creature let out a deafening roar, and the entire chamber shook violently. The pools of black liquid around the altar began to bubble more furiously, sending waves of dark mist spiraling into the air. Amara's legs trembled, and he barely managed to keep his footing. "We have to get out of here," the woman shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. But before they could move, the guardian lunged, its massive shadowy arms reaching for Amara. With a burst of adrenaline, Amara dodged, narrowly avoiding the creature's grasp. The guardian's hand slammed into the ground where he had stood moments before, sending cracked spiderwebbing through the stone floor. Amara and the woman ran toward the far side of the chamber, but the guardian was relentless, its massive form closing in on them with terrifying speed. Every step it took caused the ground to shake, and the walls of the chamber seemed to tremble in response. Amara's mind raced. They had come this far, only to be trapped by a force far beyond their understanding. The amulet's light flickered weakly in his hand, offering little hope. "We need to draw it away from the altar," the woman yelled, her voice tinged with desperation. "It's protecting something, or if we can get to the altar, we might be able to stop it." Amara's gaze flicked to the altar, now glowing with an eerie green light. He had no idea what they were up against, but he knew they couldn't give up. Summoning every ounce of courage, Amara turned and sprinted toward the altar, the guardian's thundering footsteps closing in behind him. The woman followed closely, her staff glowing faintly with magical energy. As they neared the altar, the air around them seemed to warp and twist, the dark mist coiling like living vines. But Amara pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that this was their only chance. With a final burst of speed, Amara reached the altar and slammed the amulet down onto its surface. The moment the amulet touched the stone, the entire chamber exploded with light. The blinding light from the amulet consumed the chamber, forcing Amara and the woman to shield their eyes. The air buzzed with raw, ancient energy, and the ground beneath them rumbled violently as if the temple itself was reacting to the sudden surge of power. For a brief moment, everything went silent. The oppressive darkness that had filled the temple seemed to evaporate, and the guardian, once towering and terrifying, let out a low, guttural growl before disintegrating into a wisp of black smoke. The pools of bubbling liquid stilled, and the shadows that had haunted them receded, leaving the chamber bathed in an eerie calm. Amara collapsed to his knees, panting heavily, his body shaking from the adrenaline and fear. The woman stood beside him, clutching her staff as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. We did it," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. But Amara wasn't so sure. Something didn't feel right. The amulet on the altar still pulsed with a sickly green light, but it was no longer comforting. Instead, it seemed to radiate an even deeper, more malevolent energy, one that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Suddenly, the chamber began to shift. The ancient murals lining the walls started to writhe as though they were alive, the figures depicted in them contorting and twisting in unnatural ways. The one solid stone beneath their feet cracked and crumbled, revealing a vast network of tunnels leading deeper into the earth. "This isn't over," Amara muttered, his voice barely audible. Before the woman could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber, shaking the very foundations of the temple. A new wave of shadows surged from the cracks in the floor, more ferocious and powerful than before. This was the curse of the temple, the darkness they had awoken, now fully unleashed. "We need to leave," the woman shouted, panic creeping into her voice. But as they turned to run, the ground gave way beneath them, plunging them into the dark, endless void of the temple's underworld. As Amara and the woman turned to run, the ground gave way beneath them, plunging them into the dark, endless void of the temple's underworld. Will they survive? Join us on the next episode to find out.